I'm glad I'm your excuse for coming to school on a Friday night. Don't tell any of your friends that you came to school to listen to a lecture on libraries on a Friday night, please. Make them alive somehow. I want to thank Richard and Robert for inviting me here, and also the anthropology department. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight, and I'm hoping that I'll give you a better feeling about what libraries are about. Given that nearly every major institution in our culture is groaning under tremendous pressure from heightened public scrutiny and skepticism, and even cynicism, how is it that libraries have remained so popular and so loved? Just think of it. You know, the public expresses loud and persistent complaints about government at all levels, as well as people who work in public service and in government. We're cynical about schools, we're cynical about our religious institutions, we are certainly cynical about corporations, and where I live, we are heavily skeptical and scrutinize our police and military too. But why is it that people don't generally complain about libraries? I mean, you know, after all, they're just another damn government program after all, right? But it's not only that people don't generally complain about libraries. We love our libraries. People love our libraries. A recent National Pew Research Center poll documented that 80% of people over 16 years of age who had ever used a public library said that library books and media were either very important or somewhat important to their family. Library assistance was also viewed as very or somewhat important by 76%. 72% valued their libraries for research resources, of course. Nearly 60% for internet and computer access. Nearly 60% for adult programs. Over 50% said that they liked libraries for accessing government services or even applying for jobs. Overall, 91% of these people over 16 said that libraries were either very or somewhat important to their community, and 98% of parents reported that libraries were important for their children. 98%. And in a culture these days, anyway, that has trouble and a civil war basically over what constitutes marriage, I don't think that you'll find very much in our culture today that has a consistency of this kind of agreement about an institution. So I'm very pleased this evening to be invited to unpack some of the reasons why I believe this very curious and consistent agreement exists among our people about this otherwise old, seemingly dated, and reputedly even unnecessary institution. I mean, everyone knows, everyone knows that libraries are just unnecessary these days. Nobody reads books. Google and the internet give us all the information that we need. Why bother continuing to pay for libraries when we could spend public money on many other problems? So put it in a slightly different way, what's the future of libraries in the information age if we don't need them anymore? And the answer I've come to share with you tonight is that this assumption that we don't need libraries anymore is incorrect, and that the future of libraries is indeed very bright, at least for the foreseeable future. Libraries remain a valuable and valued institution with our people because, since their invention and growth, mostly in the 19th century, libraries were born and bred and adapted to their local communities to serve their local communities in ways that their communities needed and wanted. Libraries change and adapt and thrive in response to local demands. And because they will continue to respond and adapt to local demands, we will continue to need libraries and they will continue to thrive. We can point to many reasons and factors and examples that illustrate how libraries adapt and change within local communities, but there are three that I would like to share with you this evening, and it perhaps forms a little bit of an ironic acronym. We're going to use RIP for our acronym. R stands for reading, I stands for information, and P stands for place. So let's look at the factor most everyone thinks of first when they think of libraries, the information part. Americans have historically found the information that libraries make accessible among the most enduring and celebrated of its service offerings. Accessing information is also the most obvious aspect of how libraries' service profiles have changed during the past, in the recent past. Information access has been both the most widely acknowledged of library services as well as the most quickly changing of these three RIP library dimensions. It's also the most cited reason why many people talk about the death of libraries. Much to the dismay of traditional librarians and teachers, and even among some library users, there's just no denying what we have come to call the information revolution. And it is radically changing how today's libraries, how today's library users interact with library materials. If we consider only the concept of reading books, for example, the way a recent national study did in documenting the rise of laptop and tabletop computers and other digital reading devices, new ways to access information have brought us to the point where almost all adults now own these devices. Is there anybody here that doesn't have a cell phone with them? Anybody want to admit to that? One, two? I'll be a third, but that's it. Three, in the size of the audience. Clearly, the e-book and e-reading is here to stay. And if you're a traditionalist, I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. There's no doubt about it, and we're not going back. E-reading is growing rapidly. In 2011, only 17% of adults who had read a book in the previous year read that book in electronic format. By 2014, that figure had jumped to 28%, had read an e-book either on a laptop, a tablet, or even on a cell phone. We don't have the recent figures, and we don't have any recent research about cell phones yet, but people are also obviously reading newspapers and magazines as well as text and lots of other stuff. But as a professor who observes how students read today, phone reading is certainly skyrocketing. In contrast, however, and this will help some of you traditionalists, in 2011, 71% of adults reported having read a book in conventional print format. By 2014, that figure was still 69%, only a drop of 2%, even while e-reading was skyrocketing. So it's important to understand and to acknowledge that just because reading in one format increases does not necessarily mean that reading in another format will sustain a decrease. And when you think of the claims about in history, when people were talking about the end of radio when television was invented, people were crying all over the place that radio was going to die now that TV was popular. Of course, that didn't happen. So you can see that that's another example of how both can survive, even thrive, at the same time, even during such disruptive revolutions. An even more important point can be made here, however, it seems to me, in that between 2011 and 2014, between 76 and 79% of adults reported reading books. So to bend a line from an old song, you could say, come on over, we ain't playing, there's still a whole lot of reading going on. Of course, the books are not the only format resources that people use when they access libraries. In 2012, only about 39% of adults had ever used a library website. And it's not a big shock, to me at least, that so few people were using early library websites because they were boring. These are all of the features that you can see that were just boring, clip art and all these dorky things that libraries had on in the early beginning. But by 2014, that figure had gone up to 44%. 44% of adults reported having accessed a library's website. On the other hand, we are also now training at a school like mine, training librarians to be much better at building exciting, informative, and easy-to-use websites. Here are a couple examples. Here's the San Jose Library for my school. You can see there's a lot more dynamic tension going on, a lot more interest stuff. This one has a video embedded right in the front page of it. So lots of new stuff about the community, about what's going on at the library, about what people are doing. So these library websites figure to continue to become more important as our new librarians enter the library workforce and continue to innovate and make increasingly attractive web portals into library services. It's also true that young people and young adults are frequently the most savvy and desirous of using higher level technology. It's a cliche, of course, to think about the 12-year-old who can hack into the national security computers or also major corporations. Like most cliches, these things about 12-year-olds are not likely to be very widely true. But young people are more comfortable with information technology generally, and for a simple reason: profit. Information and technology corporations research and design and build these devices for younger people and for wealthier audiences and younger markets. They study young people very closely and design these devices just for them, so it's no surprise, it should be to us, that they take to them so easily. It's got nothing to do with young people's genes, or the fact that their brains are developing a certain way, or that they might wear their pants too low or something. That's what they're designed for. So we should not be surprised to learn that 45% of young adults say they would be very happy to use mobile GPS application to locate materials in a library. They're also more likely to say that they would be likely to use a Redbox style kiosk to check out library books or movies or games if they were placed around town. Of course, older folks tend to prefer more traditional methods, like using and borrowing materials the same old way at a checkout desk. And those methods of accessing information or getting help doing so will continue. But at the larger, higher end of technology use in libraries, things can get a bit scary, even for me. Here's an example. I'm going to show you a 1-minute clip of a new book storage system that was installed just a few years ago at a university near where I teach at San Jose. It's the Santa Clara University's library's automated retrieval system. So let me show you this 1-minute clip.
As an extension of the library shelf space, the ARS is recognized for being the most monumental computer-controlled location in the library. An automatic request for a book or video can be sent to the ARS with just a few clicks. The ARS stands strong for being one of the most efficient space-saving ways to store and retrieve materials such as books, journals, videos, and other materials that require lots of space. The crane moves to the bin and brings it to the workstation, where library staff locates the item and prepares it to be picked up at the circulation desk. The best part is that requests can be picked up within minutes. To see the ARS in action, visit the viewing room located on the northeast side of the second floor in the Learning Commons.
It's almost like a ride at Disneyland. So that's the ARS system there. When I first saw this system, I sort of reacted to it as if it were a scene out of The Matrix. But you know, even The Matrix isn't all that new when you think about it. This is the Trinity Library in Ireland. It's clear that technology of all kinds is quickly changing what libraries do, how they operate, and what they offer their users. Ultimately, though, while it is true that more people are reading more materials in digital and e-formats, and we're seeing somewhat of a drop in demand for printed sources, the fact of the matter is that more people are finding the information they want through libraries, and they're accessing it in more and different ways and in a variety of types. But it's also true that people will continue to use and rely upon libraries and librarians to help them discover and find and enjoy and access these information sources no matter what the format. Libraries are not only in the book business, and they are in the information access business, and they always will be. So while it's true that information access is the dimension of libraries that are changing the most and are changing the most rapidly, there are other aspects, less discussed, but just as important, that are needing and also indeed changing. And they are changing just a bit more slowly than information access. So the second part of the RAP acronym is place. P for place. Library settings or places constitute the second of our three RAP factors in considering the library's institutional success and history, as well as giving us hints about what we can expect in the future. Unlike the rapid pace of the changing information access landscape, from print to digital. The physical landscape of libraries is changing less quickly, but changing still anyway. Behind access to information, resources, and library assistance, the space libraries offer their local communities comes in second in terms of what the public tell us they want. The notion that libraries are comparatively quiet and safe spaces is viewed as either very or somewhat important by 75% of adults who ever use a library. 70% also regard the library as a quality place in which to conduct programs for young people. Like this one, near my house when I was growing up in Los Angeles. These buildings have been held in much esteem throughout the nation. In the most recent research conducted in the early 90s by the dean of the Buffalo Library School, of the 1,600 original Carnegie Library buildings built between the late 19th century and mid-20th century, over 1,500 of them still existed. And rather tragically, in my view, 911 continue to serve as libraries. These are old buildings still serving as libraries. My own Cahuenga branch here is one of those survivors. This is a picture after the renovation. I'll show you again. We can talk about why I feel this is an ongoing tragedy later, but about 175 Carnegie Library buildings have been remodeled or converted into other uses. Communities continue to revere them as architectural treasures, and so try to repurpose them as condominiums, or community centers, shops, police departments, chambers of commerce, museums, office buildings, and my favorite, restaurants. I think that would be a pretty cool restaurant, actually. While some Carnegie buildings are examples of adaptation to change, like my old library branch here, it's basically the same building it was an entire century ago. Porterville's original library was built by a Carnegie Foundation grant in 1908, but it was replaced for its current building in 1953, which is still well over a half century old now. But the building but for the public, for all of the love and admiration it may exhibit toward these old Carnegie buildings and lots of other old library buildings, people are getting tired of these old spaces. Recent research points out that over 61% of American adults want more and different spaces in libraries to support different kinds of activities and services. 60% want more comfortable spaces, better furniture, brighter and more flexible spaces. And they also tell us that they want to eat and drink in some places in the library. How many of you have taken something to eat or drink in your library? Come on. And the rest of you are lying. I know that. I'm a librarian, I know this. 20% of the adults even tell us that they want more parts of the library collection removed so that other activities can take place. The library as place is the area in which I conduct my own research, particularly on the experience of young people in library spaces. Libraries are where one is likely to find curated art exhibits by local citizens, both young and old. One's first puppet or craft show are more likely to have been taking place in a public library. More significantly, libraries are generally among the very first place in public domain where people experience the privileges of fully entitled community citizenship. And I'm going to take out of my wallet right now my Porterville Public Library card that I got today. It's the most important card in your wallet. And it's a place of tremendous pride, especially for kids when they get their first card. But when you're a kid, likely the library is among the first experience you've had in public where you're treated with respect as a citizen. You get to roam around on your own, you get to explore and pick out what you want and what you want to take home. It's where and when you ask a librarian a question of your own, they actually take you seriously. That's a powerful public experience for kids. Library spaces have offered this experience to kids for a long time, and they will continue to offer that experience as long as libraries exist. But we've been not so good about promoting these kinds of experiences as, say, the changing information technology. I wanted to stop and ask if anybody was thinking about their first time or early childhood experience they had when they were coming up in the public library. Anybody want to share any of those things? Maybe some of the faculty members? That's just good.
We hardly had any books in my house, but my mom took us once a week to the library, and we were allowed to check out 10 books. And we took her up on it every time.
Remember roaming around in the library and what that felt?
Discover things. And when I saw that ARS thing, the first thing I thought was, you can't browse. You know, like you go looking for something, but then you find 10 things next to it that are interesting too, because it's the same subject.
By the way, that library, even in Santa Clara University Library, where they have that big mechanized matrix-like machine, they still have a big browsing collection. It's just the older stuff that they're keeping back. How about some others? Maybe Bob can just point to somebody and embarrass you. Pick a victim, I call it.
But we got a hand over here.
Yeah?
My dad took me to the library when I was a little girl, and it was the Hollywood branch.
Oh, yeah.
Right there.
Sure.
And we went up these wooden stairs that made noise in the children's section. And as I'm looking around, I see a book my teacher was reading, and just absolutely freaked out. There's the book my teacher was reading. I want to check it out. Dad says, well, do you want, you can check out more. No, I just left this one. And then I went home and read it all that afternoon and was like really upset that I had only checked out that one. So I fell in love with that library.
You didn't get your money's worth that day.
I know, I should have gotten more. That sold me on libraries, you know, that's the way.
Looking at these two images here, those of you who are parents of young kids, what about those experiences when you brought them in for the first time?
I don't know about the first time, but I remember taking my preschoolers to the Montgomery County, Maryland Library in affluent county. We had a 75 book limit per card.
Oh, wow.
And they had a hamster in the children's room.
Oh,
You can take the hamster and stay in the
Yeah, the
library.
fish tank and the hamster, and it's like, we could be in there all day.
I've never heard of that
Then
before.
we came to Porterville. We had a 10-book limit. I was appalled. Found out it was because people don't check out books here, they check out videos, and they were too expensive, they were ripping them off. So I got on the library board and tried to help them change it.
What's the limit now?
I don't know, it was 25 years ago, but, yeah, free choice, letting kids choose their own books, that's the way to go. Letting kids just free for all in the
And
library.
it's in a non-market environment too. It's not like, oh, you can't have that because it's too expensive. Yeah, you can check that out. That's pretty unusual for kids especially. Anybody else?
Or summer reading programs where they challenge you to read so many books over the summer or something like that. Gave you a goal. You were learning and interest is, but also you're striving to read how many books they wanted you to read.
Yeah, you don't get that when you go to Home Depot. Yeah.
My gratifying library experiences were taking my grandchildren for the first time. And of course, they were simply enthralled, and they looked at all this stuff. They were in preschool, actually, but that one didn't matter. They found things they liked. And the idea, they seemed to think that what they were there to do was to sit down and read everything they were interested in on the spot. Well, grandmother had other things to do also. But I think that emphasis of library as place, it was very much with them, because they were at the library, they wanted to read.
They would sit down, they would run around the book stacks, they would find things. Yeah. My own experience, I didn't even go to, even the Coengo Library that you saw pictured here, I didn't even know what that building was until I was in high school. I didn't even know about public libraries. And I always thought that building was too intimidating for me to go into. But somehow, I don't know how I got in there, but every image I have of the librarian, I remember they were sitting behind the desk reading the newspaper. I never one time talked to a librarian. They left me alone. And that was a sense, too, that I experienced even in high school. Well, I don't want to indulge simply our memories and our old sentiments about libraries, because I came here tonight really to talk about the future. But I do want to say that these memories are not only powerful, they also tell us about the power of place. and the role that the library plays in the community for that reason. So, to remain a valuable community asset, though, libraries as places must also change and evolve to stay relevant. And this is happening too, even with regard to space and buildings. One important aspect of changing library spaces is reflected in how they're increasingly redesigning spaces in which library services are delivered. Of course, libraries made all kinds of changes to their buildings to reflect the introduction of computers and other technological innovations. That's the first library memory. But these are the kind of changes that have been taking place over time. Libraries have made lots of changes to buildings to accommodate wheelchairs and other aspects of their buildings for disabled folks. And although it took nearly a civil rights revolution to bring this about, libraries have come a long way in recognizing the needs of immigrant and new American families as they adapt to the new culture. Oddly enough, while libraries have been pretty good in their love for services with children, they have not been nearly as good or nimble in responding to the needs of young people we call teenagers. Historically, libraries and architects have just rather abstained from the cultural shifts going on in American culture as it increasingly recognized the different needs of this age group. Library history here, in ignoring the spatial needs of young people, represents a rather shameful episode in my opinion. During the time of great library expansion, the country had also been creating entirely new building structures designed precisely to accommodate young people of this age. We call some of these entirely new building structure forms high schools. High schools and junior high schools and middle schools. This is an early image of my own high school, built in 1931, and yes, Leonardo DiCaprio did graduate from Marshall High School. During the same period, though, religious institutions were creating youth rooms, communities were creating YMCAs, but the libraries just ignored young people. During all of this institutional growth, to recognize how young people were different from adults, libraries continued to rather just erase them from their otherwise public spaces. Carnegie libraries, for instance, pretty much all 1,600 of them, were designed with only two populations in mind: adults on one side, children on the other. So indeed, historically, libraries have devoted more space and design energy to bathrooms than to young people. But generally, libraries continue to adapt. Partly as a consequence of some of my own work, today it's really rather rare to find a new library design or a major library building renovation that doesn't in some way finally recognize that young people have and deserve spatial consideration of their own. And in keeping with the notion of library services being more user-centric than in earlier times, better library designs today even include young people themselves as participants in the design process. Here I have a couple of examples of some work I've done myself. This was done at the Oakland Public Library, where we worked with architects who brought in design concepts, design boards. We had big groups of young people coming in, learning about what the design choices were to be made, filling out ballots and processes about what they preferred. Here are a couple of other examples of recent work in the Hayward Public Library, and then the bottom images of the new renovation of the Berkeley Public Library. So all of these institutions are involving young people in the process of how we're going to imagine what libraries are like. But whether we're talking about exposing children to their first story times and civic responsibility, or accommodating computers or wheelchairs, or even beginning to welcome the oh-so-dreaded teenager, libraries continue to adapt their physical spaces to local needs and changing circumstances. Libraries serve as nearly a unique civic environment in which communities come together to reconcile and mediate and create and navigate new cultural meanings at a local level. As communities change and evolve, libraries reflect these dynamic social tensions through the collections and the programs they offer, and even through the collections and programs they avoid. Libraries offer access to public discussion and debate about the most pressing issues of our time: environmental change, social inequalities of all kinds, immigration, sexual identity, police misconduct, and all of the cultural and artistic creativity and mess that comes with these issues. This is some work I did recently on teen spaces in public libraries. Some of you might recognize the movie clip in the lower right-hand corner. Breakfast Club. I was able to use that image in an article I wrote recently talking about the tyranny of seating options in public libraries. Wooden chair, wooden desk, boom, that's it. So now we're doing a lot more with floor seating and a lot more different kinds of seating arrangements. I refer to the computer thing on top as an information trough, like the way animals go up to a water trough, because it's one kind of seating for everyone. And now we're even using the floor in lots of different ways. Here's another example of those spaces. We tried to maximize the number of seating options available in a single space, but this is a department for just young people in this library. It's kind of tangy. Here are a couple of other examples. You can see counter heights, couch orientation, lots of different kinds of things, and then even the introduction of video screens obviously is a part of youth culture. So these are images here of the largest and most popular examples of how libraries as places bring communities together. This is the Los Angeles Public Library's foundation work. The Allowed program features a monthly speaker series that not only fills up a rather sizable auditorium, but also makes every program accessible, as do many libraries, as a free podcast. In my own work with services to teenagers, I've witnessed many great examples of how issues like violence and racism, representations of sex in magazines or on computers, content with graphic novels bring people to the library in protest. On one side of the issue or the other. Both sides have strong feelings about what the library should and shouldn't do. Libraries generally start out with the position that the Library Bill of Rights defends censorship, against censorship, but then through discussion and debate, and sometimes pain, they help communities negotiate and mediate and ultimately create a new way through the issue that is generally satisfactory to the rest of the community. The big fight going on in libraries now is what I call the weeding wars, W-E-E-D-I-N-G. Weeding wars happen as libraries begin to reduce the number of physical books and magazines they keep on their shelves, because so much of that material can be found more easily and freely on the web. However, many citizens don't understand or like that libraries are reducing the number and kinds of materials to keep on hand. And so they're accusing librarians of actually destroying the library. Librarians destroying the library. Sometimes these debates get very hot, and the city librarian in Berkeley Public Library recently had to resign over the weeding wars because the librarian was doing one thing and the community wanted to do something else. The point, though, is that as the internet continues to build its collections and makes it easier and freer, libraries now need to decide how best to use these spaces. Do I, as a university professor, always agree with these decisions? No, of course not. But my personal view here is not really the point. My point is that libraries as places bring these issues forward into a community, gives all parties in the community a voice, brings together and embraces a broad consensus, and adapts to new local conditions. Until we invent new places capable of cultivating these civic behaviors, the library remains an irreplaceable place, a physical, social institution, one capable of facilitating the coming together of peoples and resources and ideas and action. For all that is given us, and for all that it yet promises to give us, the internet cannot nearly perform anything close to these services. Libraries as places are not changing as fast as formats for accessing information, but that is part of why our people will continue to love and respect them. That enduring feature of bringing our communities together to grapple with the cultural transformation will not go away no matter how many people check out books, scroll through how many screens, or flip through how many databases. Okay, so if you've been keeping score, you know that we've covered the I in RIP, the information access part. We've discussed a bit about the P part, the library as place part, but now it's time to bring them together to close in on my argument that libraries still have a bright future. The best way to talk about how libraries bring both information access together with physical place in the community is to discuss the notion of how libraries, unlike any other public institution, define the contours of a reading culture and learning. And it is here where nearly 70% of Americans report that they or their families would suffer. 30% actually go as so far as to say that they would suffer a major impact if their local library closed. This is where information access and place come together. A full 90% say that losing their local library would cause harm to their neighbors and their community. 90% say that. There are other and more specific and daily dimensions of how libraries make connections that build a culture of reading. While mothers engage with libraries more than fathers, more than 80% of the mothers have active cards. Still, 65% of all fathers report having library cards. 73% of mothers and 54% of fathers visited the library in the past year. And when matters turn specifically to kids and the culture of reading, 85% of American adults say that libraries should coordinate with local schools. Note, I didn't say that 85% of adults say that nutritionists should interact with school kids. You really don't see 85% of parents crying out for police to work directly with schools, or judges, or dentists, or politicians. It's libraries, and it's their librarians that parents want for their kids. Then consider something I mentioned earlier about the libraries being a place in which many of us experience being taken seriously for the first time. It's not only that you, as a young person, are treated respectfully by strange adults. It's that it's also likely the first time you're introduced to your broader civic responsibilities as well. Yes, you can borrow these materials, but you need to accept the shared responsibility for taking care of these resources so that your neighbors can enjoy them and use them too. This is the beginning, your introduction to the culture of reading and learning within a community that you help to define along with others. When we look more broadly at conventional library services and programs that promote reading and literacy culture, 82% of adults say that libraries should offer free literacy programs in which adults can learn to read. There are a lot of people in the community who become adults and cannot read. There's also the issue of getting help digitizing their own materials like photos and other kind of stuff, and more online and automated services. These services still hold in the low 40%. And nearly half of adults say that they definitely want the library to offer more interactive learning experiences. But when you add those people who report that the library should maybe add more interactive services, the figure jumps to 85%. 85% of Americans in this latest research pretty much want interactive learning experiences to come together in their local library to foster a culture of reading and learning in their community, for themselves and their families, and also for their neighbors. Now, this is not always an harmonious and loving and gentle, cohesive public culture of reading I'm talking about. It's not, absolutely not all of those really nice, warm, fuzzy things. I already mentioned how rancorous the reading wars have become. Are libraries and librarians always superlative stewards of this culture? Absolutely not. In my own area of expertise, as I've alluded to earlier, library service to teenagers, which history is crammed with stories and evidence and documents and memories of librarians excluding and banishing and prohibiting and censoring and embarrassing young people, driving them away from viewing the library as an asset in their lives. Libraries have certainly wielded petty authority over many people, not just young people, for decades. Libraries have been the butt of jokes about being silent, about frumpy old women, about the display of improper or proper behavior. I have a dent in the back of my head, and I'll show you later if you want. Not from falling down when I tilt back on my chair, but from a librarian coming up from behind me and flicking me in the head so that I wouldn't. It hasn't been fun. Libraries have also been excuses to get out of the house during the school night, and to borrow mom's car just to go out and go to the library and study. I know I did that myself, and I'm sure a lot of you did too. So we all have stories about the library that way. But this is just my point. In libraries, communities have created an institution in which people can define their own definitions and meanings of a reading culture. And this is a power this broader power of the library as contributing to the well-being of our communities through cultivating a culture of reading and learning and civic engagement to a degree that no other civic institution can promise to do. These interactions may take place at library board of trustee meetings, at Friends of the Library fundraisers. They may take place in arguments about the library at a foundation or a city council meeting. They may take place in a conversation about a favorite manga author between a teen volunteer and someone who shelves books, or about animal books between a children's librarian and a first grade teacher, or about a delivery of books between a professor and an interlibrary loan librarian. But these are interactions that we make, that will make the library's future still bright. We still need an institution capable of performing this role for us. We actually need lots of institutions like this, capable of defining a culture of literacy. But for now, libraries are the ones that are doing it. And they continue to adapt to changing local needs. So before I conclude, let's watch another clip, a minute and a half, of this hot off the press, brand new American Library Association clip. I wouldn't want to too blithely pass over the significance of the nation's broad withdrawal of public support from public institutions and the general skepticism the public has of public institutions, even including libraries. Neoconservative critiques advancing how the internet can cheaply replace educational and cultural institutions, how it can replace teachers, just give everyone access to a wireless connection and that's all the educational resources anyone needs. That all of this can be done nearly entirely on terms familiar to a market ethos where students and information users are simply consumers. In many ways, the internet and the digital revolution represents the neoconservatives' fantasy come true, where everyone can, on their own, develop the skills and resources they need to compete in the marketplace, compete for jobs, compete for space in the public square, where their own individual merit will allow. There's no doubt that the internet and the digital revolution will allow these kinds of claims to flourish. Some of these claims are even true to some extent. Clearly, the information revolution will bring disruptions in how many of our institutions work. Frankly, some of these disruptions are long overdue anyhow. I mean, by now, it's clear that we have all pretty much taken to instant interpersonal communication. We like being able to look up movies and sports scores on the phone without having to find a newspaper. We like finding our way around in a new place without paper maps. I know about some of these disruptive aspects of the new technology personally. I teach at a library school, the largest library school in the world, in fact, that is entirely online. Students never come to campus to get their master's degree to qualify as professional librarians. Even without, they don't have to move, they don't have to quit their jobs, they don't have to leave their families to go to some campus over in San Jose. Our program offers people living in small and rural places an opportunity to increase their educations and the status of their employment, and to deliver higher level skills to their libraries and offer their communities better service. than they would have been able to do otherwise. So the digital revolution does bring some positive disruptions. On the other hand, in terms of libraries, the neoconservative agenda, trumpeting so many of these digitally efficient e-solutions, really only impact the first of the three factors we discussed tonight: technology delivered across to information. The internet, however, no matter what it does in the future, no matter how fast it gets, no matter how big, or no matter how great the big awesome cloud is, will ever be able to touch some of the spatial resource issues that we've raised, or offer their local communities the physically centered nexus of human creative expression within a culture of reading and thinking. It's these last two dimensions of libraries that libraries themselves have overlooked, have underpromoted, and even underdeveloped. We have undervalued the spatial uniqueness library buildings offer our communities. Beyond that, libraries, in hitching their star to the physical object of the book for so long, have so utterly worshipped and created a cultural fetish about the book that they have failed to recognize the much broader and deeper and more valued roles library plays in incubating community intelligence through developing a culture of reading, reflection, debate, and civic conversation. And I'm glad I've been able to contribute my share of this critique in advocating for spatial equity for young people in libraries. But libraries are continually adapting to new circumstances and local conditions. It is in extending and fulfilling this role that libraries contribute to the well-being of our local communities and help us see how communities extend beyond local boundaries and to connect with the world beyond. So I want to thank you, the Anthropology Department, and Robert and Richard for having me this evening, and now we have some time for some questions if you like. Library conversation on a Friday night. Okay.
Could you tell the audience just a bit about the Carnegie program?
Yeah. Well, Andrew Carnegie was became very famous and extremely wealthy industrialist in the 19th century. His view of the world was that you should make your own way, find your own resources, build yourself up yourself. And he, in trying to promote that concept, developed and founded a foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, that offered local communities money to build public libraries if they met certain conditions. And the foundation would accept invitations to give money from pastors or from professors or presidents or whoever, and would give local communities money to fund libraries. Now the local communities had to find the money to buy the books and the furniture and the staff, but he would help build the building. But the notion that Carnegie had is a little different from how we view libraries today. The vision that Andrew Carnegie had was that you were an individual, had it on your own initiative to go to the library, read up what you wanted to, learn what you wanted to, and then go out into the world and take care of business. Today we see the library more as a communal experience, where you're using community resources that are shared with the neighborhood and the community to do things that you want to do. Richard, is that the kind of response you're looking for?
Yeah, thank you.
My gripe with the libraries, though, was that they pretty much had two sides. A side for the adults and a side for the kids. And if you were in between, well, too bad. And that's how libraries have treated teenagers forever, pretty much. Somebody else?
Well, I was just going to ask if you could tell everyone a little bit about the library at San Jose State, because it's a little bit unusual.
The library at San Jose State is unusual in the sense that it really is two libraries. The first four floors of the library are the public library. So the children's room, the children's apartment is there, the popular library is on the first floor. The second, third, and fourth floors are the public library. And then from floors 5 to 8 are the university's libraries. And so all of the students from the university go and usually use those collections. They're different collections, but those are the ones that are used there at the main library. So there are two different kinds of librarians working there. There are the librarians who give programs, the ones, for example, that read to kids and do the summer reading program. They work on the lower floors, and then the academic librarians who work with classes, teach students how to use libraries in a more sophisticated way. Those are the activities that happen in the upper floors. But it's very unusual to have a co-located library like that. The library has two entrances. One that faces the public street, which is the one that faces the, remember the name of the street?
Well, it's Fourth and
Fourth.
Santa Clara.
And Santa Clara, right, thanks. I only work there. And then the other part of the library entrance faces the university campus. So you can have students coming from, you can come in from both sides, but it's just two different building entrances that sort of, the building tells the public that you can come in both ways. And it's really quite fascinating because on Sundays, the day I like to use the most, you can be working your way up to the upper floors where I would find things that I need, but you would also pass moms with strollers on the first couple of floors. And the kids get to see college students all mixing together with people that are in strollers. So it's a really cool thing to see that happen. We'll go to the librarian.
Do you know in general, across the whole country, how many librarians are being graduated with master's degrees? Because, well, in the town here, in the Porterville high schools, the 3 high schools have let go of their librarians. So I'm just wondering what kind of a future there is for librarians and how many are being graduated. Is the number less now than it has been, or?
Good. There are 56 accredited library programs that are graduating students at the master's level in the U.S. and Canada. We are graduating more now than we have before. But we're also training librarians in a different way. Yes, we're training people to take positions in schools and in public libraries and academic libraries, but we're also training librarians to work in lots of other different kinds of places. One of my recent students got a new job in a law firm in downtown San Jose. It's a law firm that specializes in representing kids from foster kids. It's a firm that takes all of the county's foster cases. So there's 16 attorneys in this law firm, this nonprofit law firm. They needed a librarian to come in and organize all of their journal reading, all of their books and stuff that they need to represent kids in foster care. And so that wasn't a library before. And now we have one of our own students who are working as a librarian, supporting those attorneys that are trying all of those cases to help support those kids. So I can't answer your question off the top of my head, but in some areas, librarians are better than it was in the past couple of years. Likely more school librarians will be hired again. I don't know if that's true here, but that's certainly true in other places. So I don't have numbers off the top of my head, but it depends, it's situational, it has context to it, and I don't know all of those things.
But there's still there's more librarians being graduated.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Let's go back here.
My question, you were talking about young adult services. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking that we really didn't hear about young adult services until about the 1970s, and maybe it was an outgrowth of the 60s and the youth culture, and then the growth of the problem novel, Judy Blume and so on, and young people having more of a voice. And then I'm also curious, under the Carnegie Library, did they expect the teenagers to stay in the children's section, or once they were 12 and they could have adult interest, could they wander over? I mean, or did they just try to find their own place?
Well, you're hitting me my area of specialization. I could talk all night about that stuff. But we had teenagers before the 1970s. So part of that's a little weird. There's also some evidence that even in the 50s, a couple of libraries started to create little collections for young people, for teenagers. So it goes back at least that far. But certainly since then, we've seen a decline since even the 70s in dealing with that. And I know when the LA Public Library was renovated after 2 arson fires burned it up in the mid-80s, it came back double in size, and not an inch was devoted to teenagers in that big, massive building, bigger than any building on campus. And they didn't give a flip about teenagers then. And so that was one of my first projects, actually. Now, your second question had to do with, I'm spacing on it, what was it?
Oh, just, when you mentioned the Carnegie,
Oh, yeah.
not allowing any,
I don't know, I don't think there was any expectation about what teenagers would do if they came into the library. When I was coming up in the 60s, in that building that I showed you, there was nothing, I had to kind of roam around. And I hit sometimes and I missed sometimes, but there was no ladder for me. It was just, and you know, librarians even today complain that teenagers don't come to libraries. Well, there's a reason they don't come, because they're boring and there's nothing for them there. And so then teenagers don't come, and then we say, well, we don't have teenagers here. Well, it's kind of a closed loop mentality. We're changing that slowly, and I'm proud of that, but it's taken a long time. Some other questions? Yeah.
So you teach in a school that's training librarians. You talked about the stereotypes a little bit. I mean, there is the friendly librarian that introduces people to books that is, and then there's the stereotype of the one that thump you on the back of the head, the shh, right, Marion the librarian kind of thing. What did your program do to try and help your students be that your community service oriented librarian?
Well, our job is to train the librarians so that when they come out and they finish our program, they have 16 things that they're competent at, that they can not only say that they're competent at, but they can give you examples and evidence, and here I've done this, I'll show you this and that. So we train them in a different way than they were trained before, A. But B, a school is not we're not really responsible for who gets hired. We get them trained. And then if they're hired by a library, and that library keeps them, that's not our fault. So if you hire Marion the librarian, and you don't fire her, you're stuck, but that's not our fault. That's your fault. And so I would hope today that there would be fewer librarians hired that would go around thumping kids on the back of their head, but I can't be sure of that. They may be still out there.
So I was wondering, yeah, like in the education programs, you know, they do a lot of methodology for teaching teachers how to teach. Do you have methodology or practicum training for how to interact with the community?
In lots of different ways, we do, yes. I don't want to toot our horn, but at San Jose, we have the largest selection of methods courses of any library school in the country, and I know that I just got off the accreditation body, so I've seen all of them, and I know we're the best at that. But we also have a lot of field experience, internships, field experience research grants, research assistance, that students learn how to do their stuff. And also we have classes that teach librarians how to teach this stuff. Yeah, it's a science in that way. Anybody have any bad librarian jokes they want to share?
You have a question. You mentioned almost the future of libraries being like a community rec center almost. What services do you see migrating toward the library that aren't there today?
A lot of the new kinds of interaction capabilities that technology is offering us, instant communication, everywhere all the time, those are the kinds of things that are being brought into libraries. So now you get, on a Friday night, you might get an all-night game event, where you've got kids coming in, gaming all night with people all over the world. Those are things that are happening in libraries now that were not even just 10 years ago. So those kinds of things. We're incorporating and embracing the technology more than shutting it out. And not everybody likes that, but that's what we're doing. And it's happening a lot more in young adult services when we're working with teenagers. They're on the cutting edge of this stuff. And we haven't, as an institution, we haven't really quite given young people credit for that, for bringing that stuff in, but that's happening a lot. And all-night activities and gaming nights are really popular.
You talked about electronic literature, your e-books and your e-readers. Do you see that libraries eventually getting to the point where you can check out electronic material that way? Because not all of that electronic material on the internet is free, so not all in the public domain. Do you think we'll get to the point where someone can bring in, say, their Kindle and check out temporarily a copy of Harry Potter?
Oh, that happens now. That happens now. And a lot of libraries, the bigger libraries, are offering being able to check out an iPad while you're in the library, or check it out. Now, I can't say this for every library, and some libraries are doing it more than others, but it's certainly happening. And that's part of the previous question, which is that we're starting to embrace in a way that we just never have before. Lots and lots of more different technological access. Yeah. And ebooks, I mean, you can check ebooks out from your desktop at home. You don't have to come in at all. But the important thing I want to leave you with tonight is that there are these three big pieces. A lot of times when you hear the libraries are outdated, we don't need them anymore. It really is referring only to the first of the three topics that we covered, information access. But the notion of the libraries being a space, a physical place in the community where everyone comes together at different times for different reasons, even sometimes if it gets messy and bloody, although not bloody. And then the other thing having to do with the promotion and the creation of a reading culture in a neighborhood or in a community. Those are the things that we also talk about, and those are the things that all three together give me a lot of confidence that we are a long way from fully remote. So I would encourage you to, if you haven't already, get your own library card. They're free. Got mine today, like I said. And I would also encourage you, if you have any interest in, once you finish your BAs, to think about becoming a librarian. It's good working conditions. You do great work with the public. I still, after so many years of coming up as a librarian in Los Angeles, I miss the interactions that I had with those kids in Echo Park, you know. And it's a way to really bring your whole self to a community and make a difference. It's good stuff.